All right, welcome everyone. Today is Wednesday, the 16th of October, 2024, and this is the Cluster API Karpenter Feature Group meeting. We are a sub-project of Kubernetes SIGs, and as such, we follow their meeting guidelines, which basically can be summarized as please treat everyone as you would expect to be treated, or explicitly so. Please be kind to each other. And if you'd like to speak, please raise your hand and I will call on you. I would invite everyone to add themselves to the attendees if they would like to. No requirement, but and I just had one agenda item I wanted to talk to. So I think 2 weeks ago, I started to look at the updating the project to the 1.0 version of Carpenter and also switching up to updating to Kubernetes. I think it's at 1.30 or 1.31 there, and updating the cluster API bits. I wasn't going to try to go all the way to 1.8, but I was going to try to bring it up to 1.7 and then switch to 1.8 afterwards. It's being a little challenging because I think there was a problem there was a dependency problem between I think controller runtime that cluster API was using, and thus we were using in the Carpenter provider, and in the Carpenter main repo they were using a lower version of controller runtime, and it was causing me some problems getting the whole thing to compile properly. But I've seen that they've updated the versioning there, so maybe they've fixed that problem. I also noticed some weird behavior when I tried to bump to the newer Carpenter versions, uh, and it was failing to compile. And I looked at the way AWS was doing it because the AWS provider has already bumped to the 1.0 release chain, but they weren't using the most recent one. They were using like a specific commit hash. So when I switched to the commit hash they were using, I could see that the errors kind of changed slightly. So it's ongoing. I'm hoping to have a PR up for this maybe in the next couple weeks. And yeah, just get it. It doesn't look like the changes between 0.37 and 1.0 are huge. I mean, they did version the node pool API to V1. So that's a big change, but like the changes to the actual object, I don't think will impact us at all. So it should be fairly easy, but that's kind of what I'm looking at is getting it updated to 1.0 and then getting a release out. I guess we'll probably if I can get it updated and working and all the tests going and everything, I'll probably do another release to 0.2. But it's not a huge deal at this point, but I think the API version change is probably enough. So I guess, did anybody have questions or comments about that? Okay. The only other thing that's on my mind right now is that after I get the 1.0 stuff updated, um, I would like to get back into trying out like an experiment where I had the asynchronous machine creation happening. Um, so that is something that I'm looking at. It's a little difficult though, because in order to do it properly, I need to set up another controller that runs internally inside of this thing, and then they need to kind of play nice with each other. And I'm not sure if Carpenter will tolerate me changing the provider IDs. This is something that I've talked about with the Carpenter developers. I've looked at the code. It seems like it should be okay, but I don't know if it'll work that way. And what I'm talking about here, just to expose the details, are there's a point in the interface between Carpenter and the concrete provider where Carpenter says what instance types are available, and it gets the instance types are available, and then it says, okay, I'd like you to make a node claim for this, these constraints. And then the provider is supposed to go at that point and make the machine and kind of get the provider ID right away. But we have this issue, and we've talked about it before, where we need to increase a replica count on like a machine deployment, and then we have to wait for the machine to come back. So it looks like Carpenter will hold a node claim and it won't act on it if the condition is still such that the node is still registering, right? And when you give the node claim back initially, it has this condition on it that says, okay, I'm still in registering state. And then it gets cleared. And it gets cleared once it sees the provider ID and it sees a node that matches the provider ID. Then Carpenter says, okay, this thing is registered now, I can clear it. And so what I'm thinking is I'm going to give it a bad provider ID to begin with, which means it will never find it as a node. And then when the machine is created, I'll change the provider ID on the node claim, and I think it will get re-reconciled in Karpenter. And at that point, it will find the proper provider ID as a node, and then it will clear the registering condition, and it will allow Karpenter to kind of move on with the rest of its activity. So I think that's the way it's going to work, but I haven't, none of the Karpenter devs have kind of done this, and there's a lot of code there. So, anyways, that's kind of what I've been thinking. Mike, I see you got your hand up, please.
Yeah, this vaguely reminds me of something from the earlier days of Kubernetes. Didn't there used to be an ID that the AWS provider would use when the instance ID wasn't available for some reason? Like if the metadata API wasn't there? Wasn't there something that used to be put into that? Is that ringing any bells for anyone? Or am I thinking of something else?
And was that part of the cluster API
No,
AWS? Was it part of like the
like
CC?
the kubelet itself.
Yeah, that would have been part of like that was probably part of the in tree.
Yeah, like really old school, like
Yeah,
1.10 type days, like way back in the day.
right. I
I
mean, there
seem to
probably was
remember
some.
some key that they used for like the unknown instance ID thing. Um,
I mean, you're probably right. That was probably part of the CCM back then, the part of the cloud controller back then, right? Because it,
yeah,
it, it was supposed to talk to the metadata service and say, oh, here's the provider ID, and then attach it to the node. Um, so
yeah,
that's probably what it was.
yeah. So the reason I bring it up, not to, I wouldn't suggest spending too much time on it, but I'm just thinking if I am remembering that correctly, it might be worth using that same ID just from a recognizable perspective. Um,
Yeah, I mean, it's worth the research at the very least. Like, just to go, like, I don't know if that's still in the AWS cloud controller, but like, if they have something like that, yeah, let's just go look there and maybe, yeah, you're right, copy the same thing. Um,
yeah,
have to do a little research.
yeah. I mean, I wouldn't suggest spending too much time on it. It's just like, hey, it's a nice to have, but if it's not, then it's no big deal.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and, obviously, like Carpenter didn't exist back then, so who knows how Carpenter would have behaved in that kind of situation if, like from what I can tell, what Carpenter tries to do is it makes the node claim, and the provider is then responsible to satisfy the claim and give a provider ID. And then the node claim in Carpenter, it starts off in a state where it has kind of like an initializing condition, and that gets cleared. And then it has this registering condition. And it seems like there's a loop in Carpenter where it checks the node claims when it's reconciling them. And if it sees something that's in registering, it looks to say, okay, do I have a node that matches like the ID that you're expecting here? And once it finds it, then it goes on. And so I think it's safe that we could probably put any value we want to in there. But if it works that way, then yeah, there's probably some time period where it's just reconciling, waiting for the node to have the proper ID put on it, which in this case would be done by the CCM or something like that. So that there's probably a little bit of that happening, and I'm hoping I can kind of abuse that mechanism a little bit. Cool. Great suggestion. Thank you, Mike. Uh, so yeah, so that's kind of what I'm thinking for the next things I'd like to get into, but it's probably going to take me a couple months to get that written to a point where I could actually like test it out and everything. Um, but yeah, I don't know. Any other questions or comments about that? Okay, well, that kind of brings us to the end of the agenda items that I wanted to talk about. Are there any other agenda topics that people would like to bring up? Yeah, Mike, please.
Just wanted to check code review type stuff. I know we talked briefly over Slack about needing with that. Have you worked out how you'd like to have some code review stuff done? Should I just be watching the repo, keeping an eye out for PRs that come in? Or is there stuff that you want or would like some preliminary code reviews on or anything like that? that I can help out with. I don't have the time at the moment for like writing code to help out with this, but if there's other stuff, I'm happy to help out.
Yeah, awesome. That's great to hear. So yes, I would say like at this point, we're kind of like we're in open source mode, right? Like you're a maintainer on the project. We all have the ability to do like LGTM reviews and everything. So there aren't any PRs up at the moment, but
Yeah.
I'm probably going to make one for the 1.0 bump, and there might be some other cleanup ones coming in. So I'd say, yeah, just keep your eyes out, and we have it the approved slash LGTM dual lock methodology is in place, so we can merge this just like any other kube stuff. The tests are all automated and everything. So I would say, yeah, like if you see stuff that looks good, go ahead, put your stamp of approval on it. If I'm going to set up a Slack channel for us as well. And like if I run into issues where I need help, I might ping you or Jeremy or Marco. I might reach out to see if people could give a review or something. But at the moment, yeah, I would say let's just yeah, it's an open source repo. We're all contributors. I would like to keep this very, democratic and open and just, yeah, like I invited, the reason I invited you, Mike, and Marco and others is because, I have a lot of respect for the work you're doing. I know you look at this code and you understand it. And yeah, like I kind of trust everybody here to, let's all do the right thing and build an awesome project.
Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to reach out, see if there was anything else I could, help out with since I wasn't able to, put the time in for code at the moment. So,
Yeah, I'd say, yeah, any reviews that come up, would love to have your input on them. Um, I have a feeling that we might start to see some issues coming in as well, because I've been talking with a few users who are starting to try this out, and I'm guessing they're going to start running into, issues and whatnot. So I'd say, yeah, like I would love like any participation that you have time for, like that would be great.
okay, great. I can do that.
All right, cool. Anything else people want to talk about? All right, going once, going twice. All righty. We'll call it a meeting. Take back about 13 minutes of our day here. Thanks, everybody.
All right. Have a great week.
Thanks so
Thanks.
much. Bye.
Bye.